Hey, what's going on, Who Dat Nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones, the host of the State of the Saints podcast. And some of you probably thought about starting your very own sports podcast. Well, let me help you out. I want to tell you a little bit about Anchor. Now, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's an easy way to make a podcast, and it's free. You don't have to worry about paying a bunch of money each month. There are creation tools to allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so you don't have to worry about that. So it can be heard on apps like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and many, many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. So go to anchorfm.com and start your very own podcast today. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Hey, what's going on, Who Dat Nation? It is yours truly, TJ Jones, the host of the State of the Saints podcast. And I have a special guest with me from The Athletic. We have Larry Holder. Hey, how you doing, Larry?
I'm good. How are you hanging?
Hey, I'm doing just fine. Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast and talking Saints football with us. We really do appreciate it.
I'm just glad we're talking football and it's Saints football. Yeah. And, we're able to do this sort of thing as we're kind of navigating the COVID-19 pandemic. Right. And, they've been through, more than a handful of practices. So that's a good sign, and not a lot of effects, thankfully, really around the NFL with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. The NFL has been doing pretty well, monitoring these testing and, making sure that these players are safe and putting in protocol if there are some tests that come back, not the way they should be. But the New Orleans Saints, they've been doing a good job, keeping players safe and controlling the COVID, the COVID, testing and everything like that. But the first thing I want to ask you is about a player that actually signed with the Saints in the offseason, and a lot of people thought that he was going to be a part of the Saints organization, and that's Nigel Bradham. He was picked up from the Philadelphia Eagles, and he ended up getting cut today, which was a shock to a lot of people. So my first question to you is, why did the New Orleans Saints decide to cut Nigel Bradham after they just brought him in?
Yeah, I think it is an interesting topic, just because, like yourself, I figured, okay, they're bringing in an experienced guy who can play multiple positions, and he's coming from the Eagles, where it's not like he played all that poorly. Like, he was about to make too much money with the Eagles, and then they cut ties with him. But, I think that the Saints probably liked what they saw with some of their younger linebackers, specifically, say, Alex Anzalone and Zach Bond. And it's funny, when the news came out this morning about that, I'd asked Dennis Allen and linebackers coach Michael Hodges about Bradham a couple of days ago, just curious to see what they were thinking and where they might put him. And it's funny, they said some good things about him, but both of them also said, well, they're competing and we're just going to throw them all out there. And then when I go back and think about it, well, that might have been a telltale sign that things weren't looking so bright for Bradham. And look, I don't know if maybe something in there where he's saying, look, I'm not getting starter caliber reps and this, that, and the other. And maybe he was ready to move on. That could have easily happened. I'm not saying it did, but it could have easily happened. But I think it is more of a confidence boost that, say, Anzalone, Bond, maybe even Caden Ellis, some of those guys, they feel like give them a good base, and maybe they want to see some of the other younger guys who might not cost as much. And obviously they know what they have in Demario Davis. And I don't know the total health right now of Kiko Alonso, but they might be thinking, okay, maybe he's, he could be available and later on as we move along. And so I think it's more a positive sign that they like what they see from the linebackers outside of Demario Davis, since we already know what they have in him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I just looked at, this guy is a veteran. He played in the NFL for 9 seasons. But I do want to ask you another thing about Nigel Bradham. Do you think that his comments in a press conference that was conducted last week may have played a role in him actually getting cut by the team? I mean, I know the Philadelphia Inquirer picked up the story when he said, quote, I'm finally playing for a winning organization. Do you think that that could have played a role in the Saints deciding to, cut him?
I don't think anything that little would do that. But, I mean, if you're in on a one-year deal and you're trying to make a team, it could have played a part in it. But I doubt it. I doubt that was an overriding factor. I think it's probably more along the lines of that they feel a little bit more confident with some of the younger guys that have, and that they don't need a ton of linebackers. Like if Nigel Bradham is going to be on the team and he's not a starter, but he better be able to play special teams, this, that, and the other. He probably hasn't done that a lot in the last several years, and so they probably figure it might be cost effective to go another route, and they like the young bodies maybe that they have at linebacker.
Right. I mean, like you said earlier, I mean, the fact that they can cut him and feel confident about some of those other players, I mean, it speaks volume. Speaking of which, let's talk about another linebacker, the rookie Zack Baun. He's been making a lot of waves at camp, and I also heard that he has been running with the first team. So what can you tell us about Zack Baun, and what do you think he can bring to the New Orleans Saints defensively?
I think that the fact that he's been running with the first team is probably a good telltale sign that they're comfortable with him either at the strong side linebacker, which is probably his spot for now, and they ultimately want him to be a middle linebacker, so much so where their linebackers coach, Michael Hodges, referring to his interview with the media last week, where he says he feels like he could be a good middle linebacker. And that is something that he didn't really play a lot of, obviously, in Wisconsin. Yeah. He was more of a pass rush guy, and I think they're going to try to mix and match those traits and kind of play him wherever they feel like they can and feel like he brings some versatility. So, the fact that we're seeing him early, I think is a good sign. It does kind of remind me of back when they drafted Alex Anzalone. You started seeing him kind of move up the depth chart pretty quickly. And if you remember, look, he was starting when he got hurt in his rookie season in 2017. So they probably feel the same sort of comfort with Baun, but Baun is still kind of more learning the position of being a more traditional linebacker, even though I know that they're using him and want to look to use him in pass rush situations. The defensive line coach, Ryan Nielsen, talked about how they have worked with him a little bit because they feel like he could be maybe like an edge guy, in a certain special package. But look, they definitely have high thoughts on Baun and the way he could be versatile and play maybe multiple positions.
I mean, what you said about Alex Anzalone, I mean, he was doing an outstanding job coming from Florida. Until, like you said, until he got injured his rookie year. I think he got hurt in the Dolphins game when they played in London.
Right.
But he did an outstanding job. And, I'm just hearing a lot of things about Zack Baun. I mean, I watched him a lot in college when he was at Wisconsin. I mean, he's a smart player. And, I mean, I know Mike Hodges, he's been ranting and raving about him, about his football IQ in the offseason, and now that he's on the field, I mean, everything that you hear about him is all positive. So we're looking forward to seeing him play. Another competition that is going on in Saints camp is the wide receiver position. The Saints have a platoon of wide receivers that I feel like could be starters on other teams if they don't make the starting rotation with the Saints. But one player seems to be making a lot of noise is Tre'Quan Smith. Tre'Quan Smith, I heard today, he had some really big plays. Drew Brees threw him a pass, I think, with like a 40-yard pass. Everybody's talking about the way that he's running and how big and how strong he's got in the offseason. Do you think that this could be the year that we see the Tre'Quan Smith that we have been waiting for since he got drafted from Central Florida?
Yeah, I think it depends on your expectations, just because if you look at the hierarchy of, say, wide receiver, and then you add Jared Cook to the mix, and if Alvin Kamara is as healthy as everyone says he is, and Joel Thomas, their running back coach, says he is more than healthy. So he would be your fifth option. But I do think that they're looking at him, trying to see if he could develop him a little bit more in the deep passing game.
Right.
But I think people also have to remember that Tre'Quan Smith, each of the last 2 years had 5 touchdowns. So
Right.
he's been banged up, and I know his rookie year he was a little inconsistent.
Right.
But Drew Brees certainly said at the start of camp that he feels like this could be a big year for Tre'Quan Smith. And if Tre'Quan could be a solid number 3, I mean, you're not asking him to be a number 2 because you have Emmanuel Sanders.
Right.
But if he could stay healthy and be within the offense, I do think that you can see that jump. And a lot of people, I feel like they're saying, oh, well, is he going to be the next Nick Toon? And that's going back to the 2012 draft.
Whoa.
Right, exactly. Because there are high expectations for him.
Right.
He was a 4th-round pick back then. And he really was, he didn't turn out to be really any part of the Saints offense.
No,
and I wrote before training camp that Tre'Quan Smith, he's already surpassed Nick Toon. So if you're making those comparisons, you're just being lazy. I mean, that's where you are. But no, look, I do think that Tre'Quan Smith, it seems like he has a good rapport with Brees at times, and you're starting to see that the last few days. And so, it's something that he knows the offense. He's familiar with the system. So if any one of the receivers outside of Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders would emerge, I would definitely say he's a favorite, and he's looking so right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think about Tre'Quan Smith, and you said, I mean, I wouldn't compare him to Nick Toon. I think Nick Toon only had like 1 touchdown his entire Saints career.
It's because of the draft, where a similar draft round, mid-round guy, high expectations,
Right.
and so that's why I've heard people mention him in that ilk,
Right.
or even like an Adrian Arrington who was around the team for 5 years back, in 2009 and the early 10s, and you're just you hear these camp superstars and then they kind of fade out. But no, I think Tre'Quan is more talented than both of those guys, and so it's unfair. Like that's the whole thing is it's an unfair comparison. Like Tre'Quan's better than those guys. There's no question.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, Larry, I feel like is going to help him is the fact that I feel like he's going to play more on the outside. I mean, I think with Ted Ginn Jr. Being a part of the Saints organization, he played mostly on the outside too, and that's left Tre'Quan in the slot. And Tre'Quan wasn't really, a slot receiver. I mean, he did most of his damage at Central Florida on the outside. I mean, he was fast. He was one of those guys that can take the top off the defense and catch those deep balls. And I feel like him being on the outside a little bit more now that you have Emmanuel Sanders, who can play on the outside, but I mean, he's a quality slot receiver. He can do some damage in the slot. I feel like Tre'Quan Smith probably will end up making some more explosive plays. And I mean, Sean Payton even said, Sean Payton likes him a lot, and he talks about how tough he is. And one thing you can't say about Tre'Quan, I mean, he catches some tough passes. I mean, it's been a couple of times where, he has gotten decked. I mean, I could think about him taking a shot from KZ. I think he had to get stitches. I mean, in the Philadelphia Eagles game, I think he caught his second touchdown and almost got knocked out. I mean, he's a tough guy. So hopefully, he can make some more noise, and be one of those players that can help contribute to the success of the team.
I think that's a good point, though, that you make, that Ted Ginn's gone. And it will allow Tre'Quan to play more outside because Michael Thomas can play inside.
Right.
Emmanuel Sanders, we know he can play inside. And it would play to Tre'Quan's strength. So I do think that's a really good point. And Curtis Johnson, as we did kind of our car wash of assistants a couple of days ago, he mentioned that they're really looking to try to improve Tre'Quan as a deep threat, Sanders, and they try to steal Deontay Harris from the special teams and try to get him more involved in the deep game. But I think that is a really good point to have him play the outside because you have your top 2 receivers are definitely comfortable playing on the inside when asked to play that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I want to see him really make some noise because I really want to see him succeed. Oh, you mentioned guys that are considered like camp heroes. We talked about the Adrian Arringtons. You can even probably throw a Brandon Coleman in there. Another guy that always seems to come up is Emmanuel Butler. Emmanuel Butler having another solid camp. A lot of people thought they were going to see a lot of him last season. He had kind of a redshirt year with the New Orleans Saints. So is it a possibility that we may see Emmanuel Butler hit the field this year?
I think it's too early to tell. And just for your listeners, a lot of people like to say, oh, well, the media overhypes so-and-so XYZ. We only report what we see. I mean, that's – and you know, Emmanuel Butler, for a couple of weeks there, he looked really good. He was catching passes from Drew Brees. Drew Brees running up to him and attaboying him, and it looked good. Right. Then he got hurt. Then he faded off. So – the hype was legit early, but then the fade off happened and wasn't, you weren't totally stunned that he didn't make the team because you're not going to make it out of 2 weeks. So I think for Butler, he's got to do it consistently. And there are certainly slots open, say, past Traquan Smith, depending on where the Saints want to keep guys, say if they want to keep 5 receivers, if they want to keep 6 receivers, and mix and match, where do you slot Ty Montgomery as like a receiver, a running back? You hear the quote unquote numbers game, but look, the promise last offseason was legitimate, and he needs to replicate that for a whole camp, though. And he's not going to have the luxury of preseason games, and he fell flat when he came back from his injuries. He fell flat in the preseason games, and they felt the time to develop him, and so. He doesn't necessarily say if he gets cut and they bring him back to the practice squad. There's not this super hype around him or there's not going to be preseason games if he would play well. So I think that's something that we have to take into account. But yeah, I think it's too early to tell. You're seeing some positive signs. And so, but it is not the Emmanuel Butler hype train. Not quite like. You'd rather hear the hype train about a guy like Traquan Smith, which, he's on the team and he's playing well. So that's a better thing. Yeah,
I think with Emmanuel Butler, I mean, it's almost to me, it's like that one guy that that you play basketball with all the time and he's really good. He's better than everybody else. Then all of a sudden, like some random strangers come out to the park and he doesn't play up to expectations. He reminds me of that. Like, I feel like when he was playing in practice and going up against guys that were on his team, I mean, he was dominating. But then when you seen him like go up against the Chargers and with the Dolphins, he just kind of faded out. I don't know if the lights were a little bit too bright for him or what, but I feel like if he can channel that game that he brings to practice and he goes out there and he can catch a pass over C.J. Gardner-Johnson, he can catch a pass over another cornerback, and really stand out. If he can replicate that week after week, I mean, he would definitely be one of those diamonds in the rough, and he can be one of those guys that can contribute in a big way to the team. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him as well. I mean, looking at this guy, I mean, he looks like almost like another Julio Jones or something like that in his uniform. I mean, he looks physically imposing. Like, so I want to really see this guy step it up and really play with the confidence that I feel like will take him to that next level. I feel like if he does that, then he can definitely make the team and he can definitely be a key contributor.
Well, you brought up Brandon Coleman earlier, and it might be a good comparison to him because Brandon Coleman, he definitely had the size. It took him a couple of years to really get on to the roster. If you think back, that camp, the undrafted guys everyone was looking at were Brandon Coleman and Shontavious Jones.
Yeah.
And both of them were on the practice squad, and Shontavious Jones actually got the late season call up to the 53-man roster while Brandon Coleman didn't. And Coleman, it took him a couple of years, and similar thing like you said, the lights come on and they get the yips or they're just not ready for the lights. So I think it's a similar comparison to right now with Emmanuel Butler. And I'm curious to see where he happens because you're right. He looks the part. He looks like an imposing figure. I think eyes will still be on him. And I feel like though, if he can't get it done this camp, I think the stars shine on him is gonna fade even more.
You got a point on that. Let's go ahead and let's move to the defensive side of football. Well, Larry, I got to ask this question because my inbox has been flooded with this question since the story came out yesterday. about safety Earl Thomas. Now, Earl Thomas, was cut by the Baltimore Ravens, and people have been asking me in the Who Dat Nation, would the Saints consider signing Earl Thomas? Now, if you were the New Orleans Saints, could you see a spot for Earl Thomas on your team? And do you feel like Earl Thomas can contribute and help the Saints possibly make another Super Bowl run?
I'd say at this rate, no, just because I feel like they like where they are at safety. They know, look, Marcus Williams is going to the final year of his deal. Earl Thomas would be basically a free safety. He wouldn't come in and be a Malcolm Jenkins type.
Right.
And look, Earl Thomas is leaving kind of a combustible situation that he got himself into, right? So I don't think the Saints, and I don't think Earl Thomas would necessarily come in and start fighting people, But it reminds me of a similar situation where the Saints said, look, we're going to eat it because we want to get rid of a guy who's kind of combustible in the locker room, and that was Junior Gillette. I mean, they ate a ton of money. And he was coming off of 2 double-digit sack years, but the locker room was getting very muddy in there. And Sean Payton, especially after that arrest after the 2014 season, look, it was going to be over. They were basically waiting to see if the NFL would suspend him, and then they could try to get out from under that money. It didn't happen. I know the Ravens are filing a grievance because of probably conduct detrimental. Yeah. But look, I feel like that the Saints are feeling good with Marcus Williams. They've got C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They got Malcolm Jenkins. P.J. Williams, they're calling him the Swiss Army knife. I'm waiting for him and Taysom Hill to fight over the nickname, now that P.J. Williams has apparently taken it over, at least from Aaron Glenn and Dennis Allen. So, like, I just don't see it. I mean, I know Saints fans like to get excited. I get asked about Jadeveon Clowney every day,
Me too. Me too.
So, I get the excitement over him, but no, I just don't think that the Saints, like, they don't need him. Like, if they wanted him, and I just find it to be unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, I just look at how the Saints have spent the last 3 to 4 years trying to get a good combination in the locker room. I think about all of the problems that the Saints had, like you alluded to with Junior Gillette. I mean, you even had stuff like Brandon Cooks getting upset when the Saints played the Rams and he didn't get a reception in the game. You had like people in the locker room, and it got to a point where I can remember Drew Brees in an interview saying that he even contemplated retiring, I think, after the 2016 season. So, I mean, it was pretty bad. So I don't know if you want to bring somebody in that has that type of mind frame. That's why I was kind of shocked that the Saints even thought about bringing Antonio Brown in. I don't know what that was about, but I just feel like the Saints have done an outstanding job having a good mixture of veteran leadership, combine that with these young players. And these young players can learn how to be pros. They can learn, how to, develop into that leadership role. Like, you see people like Drew Brees, he leaves, he's injured. All of a sudden, Demario Davis comes in and he's a part of the huddle. You see Cam Jordan and Teron Armstead, they're taking over the interview process. So I think that's very important for young players to have in the locker room, is those type of veterans that can teach them how to be pros. And I don't think that Earl Thomas would fit that mold. He's a great player. I mean, his resume speaks for itself. Been one of the best safeties in football ever since he stepped foot in the league out of University of Texas. But it just wouldn't be a good fit. I would take a Malcolm Jenkins, a guy who's a leader on and off the field, over a guy that you really don't know what you're going to get. So I really like the move, and I would prefer to take Malcolm Jenkins over Earl Thomas, even though both of them are incredibly talented.
Yeah, when you look at that in those situations, you bring up Antonio Brown. They looked at him because they felt like they had a hole at wide receiver. Right. They know he's uber talented. They wanted to give him a look. And then he made it a sideshow in New Orleans. They were like, okay, never mind. This is all we need to know. But look at what they did last year with Janoris Jenkins.
Right.
They brought him in. He certainly had some baggage.
Right.
But they had a spot of need immediately.
Right.
And they said, all right, the baggage wasn't Antonio Brown-esque.
Right.
They felt like that Janoris Jenkins would come in and step in for Eli Apple. And look, Apple ended up getting hurt.
Right.
And so Jenkins played. And now they have Jenkins, who they feel like fits in this locker room very well.
Yep.
Aaron Glenn saying, look, he's really happy to be in New Orleans because it's a winning culture.
Yep.
You have people who are, good players and this, that, and the other, left and right. The Giants have not been good for a while, and that culture has been bad. And so someone like him is like, oh, all right, good. And he's going to play hard, and now the Saints are in good shape. So it's different when you don't have like this gaping need. Like, do they have a gaping need at safety? No. Did they at wide receiver at that time when they were talking about Antonio Brown? Yes. Did they at that time when they were talking about Janoris Jenkins? Yes. And of them, I mean, Jenkins seems like the most stable of them now. So, I think that's, you're going to look around the league and boy, I could tell you the Saints are salivating with Jenkins and Lattimore as their 1-2 combo at corner. Gives them a lot of options to be, exotic on that defense because they can trust their two outside corners who really play press coverage.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with Janoris Jenkins. I just think the frustration of not making it to the playoffs and having all the talent that he possesses. I mean, Janoris Jenkins was a really good cornerback, whether it was in St. Louis or even in New York. And I mean, and when you're a big fish in a little pond and the organization seems like they're not doing what they need to do in order to get you where you need to be, that can become frustrating. I mean, he even said it. I mean, he's excited to be here. Like you said, he's excited to be here. He's ready to play. And he did outstanding job for those 3 games that he played last season. So now that he has a training camp under his belt, I'm looking forward to seeing this 1-2 combination. But also I want to talk, last question is about the rotation of the defense. You talked about Jadeveon Clowney. People have been asking about him coming into the Saints organization. Do you think that the Saints need a Jadeveon Clowney? Do you feel like the Saints can be ready to rock and roll with what they have right now?
Oh, I think they're ready to rock and roll what they have right now. And actually, some good positive comments the last couple of days, including today after today's practice about Sheldon Rankins looking good. I mean, the fact that he's running around, he provides, if he's healthy, he could be a pass rusher up the middle. I mean, for sure. And look, Marcus Davenport, I think people give him a hard time. I mean, he had 6 sacks last year. Jadeveon Clowney had 3. I mean, they get enamored with this. And I think Trey Hendrickson is a good number 3.
Yeah.
Carl Granderson has had to put together a couple of good practices as a number 4. We know where Cam Jordan is.
Right.
And I just think that people expect Marcus Davenport to be Reggie White right away. So that's just.
I said the same exact thing on the podcast last night. The same thing. Are you the same person?
Did you?
The same player. Took the words right out of my mouth.
I'm reading your brain. I think.
Exactly.
No, but you look at it and he's faster to the quarterback than Jadeveon Clowney is. Like, I did a big story on a few weeks ago on The Athletic, just about busting the myths of the pass rush, and part of my argument was comparing him to Jadeveon Clowney and to Everson Griffin, and look, Marcus Davenport was either right up there or even beyond those guys, and I just think people need to understand that, and I understand frustration with injury, but look, the fact that he's put on weight, he's up to 280, so now he's about 15 to 20 pounds heavier than he was his rookie year.
Right.
And now he's not just being fast, but he can muscle people. Like, that is he's like about 6'5", 6'6". So he's tall, but as heavy as Cam Jordan. So they're trying to mold him into an every down guy.
Right.
And I know they have confidence in do that. They want him to be consistent. There's no doubt about that. And that's something that they said, look, at times he looked great last year, and at times he wasn't as consistent, so that's got to improve. But I don't think they need – I think they're good. Like, I think they have one of the best defensive lines in the NFL and one of the best pass rushes in the NFL. If people complain about it, they better go watch other teams because they're definitely not as good as what the Saints bring.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they were like ranked in the top 10, I think, in sacks, I think, in the NFL last season. I think somebody said that they were an average defensive line. I said there's nothing average about a team being in the top 10 at all. And, one thing that really bothers me, Larry, is the fact that people give Marcus Davenport such a hard time. But Marcus Davenport over the last 2 seasons had better 2 seasons than Cam Jordan did. Cam Jordan did not have a sack his first season, and I mean he's played at a higher level. If you want to, I mean, it's for the exception of the injuries, he's played at a higher level. And I just don't understand about the whole Clowney situation. I mean, like you said, he had 3 sacks. He never had a double-digit sack season in his entire career, and he played opposite of the best defensive end in the last 15 years in J.J. Watt. So I don't understand, like, why is it that everybody just going crazy about him? The only logical explanation I can have is his name. Like, we in the Who Dat Nation, we love big names. We like splash players. And sometimes we don't really look at the stats, or we don't look at what we actually have in-house. And I think a lot of the Who Dat Nation are pending their logic on the fact that they just believe that Davenport will get injured this season, or Sheldon Rankins will get injured this season. But if you're looking at these guys as a healthy unit, they have one of the best pass rushers in all of football. So, I mean, I really like what we have, and I really don't understand the whole Jadeveon Clowney watch that's going on right now. I think it's a reason why he's still out there in some cases, that nobody really is going after him or giving him the money that he wanted in the first place.
There's no doubt it's because he's the number 1 overall pick. Yeah. And he was a freak in college. And even then, people were like, well, maybe he takes downs off this, that, the other to save himself for the NFL. It's like, well, now what's the excuse? And, oh, by the way, Trey Hendrickson had 4.5 sacks last year. Yep. Jadeveon Clowney had 3. And he's your 3rd defensive end. So, it's like it's the name. It's you get enamored with that and such. And so, look, I think – and you mentioned top 10. Look, the Saints were among – the top 3, top 2 in some of these categories as far as pass rush goes. And, I think you get enamored with a name. You want to be great everywhere. I mean, you can't be great, So, look, the Saints are in very good shape as far as that defensive line is concerned. And, I think it's a strength on the team that they have so many good players along the entire front 4.
Yeah, I mean, I like them. I like the fact that they're young. A lot of them are raw. I mean, you could kind of mold them into the players that you want them to be. And, I mean, we got to remember those 5 weeks when Teddy Bridgewater was in the game. I mean, they were one of the best defenses in football. So I think if you can replicate what you did those first 5 seasons through a 16-game span, or what I like to say a 19-game span all the way to the Super Bowl, I think you should be okay. But, Larry, thank you so much for being a part of the State of the Saints podcast. And before you get up out of here, can you let everybody know how they can reach you?
Absolutely. At Larry Holder on Twitter. And, of course, look, I work theathletic.com/New Orleans. We've got blanket coverage everywhere of sports all across the region. Of course, The Athletic, we're all across the country, all across the world. We just made 2 years old in our New Orleans bureau. I helped launch that on a kind of a brave gamble by myself and Will Guillory a couple of years ago, but super thankful. Easily, one of the best, if not the best, sports sites in the world. So theathletic.com/New Orleans. I appreciate you having me on, man. I'm glad. And look, great minds think alike on some of these things, and I didn't even know.
It was almost as if, like, I promise you, the same things you were saying was the same thing I was saying on my last podcast. But I appreciate you so much, Larry, for being a part of the State of the Saints podcast. Thank you so much for sharing some of your insight with us in the Who Dat Nation, and we look forward to reading some of your articles in The Athletic.
You got it. Thanks for having me. And, glad you're doing this podcast. You're getting good guests like Jeff Duncan doing a good job. Appreciate all the support.
Yeah, thank you so much. Once again, this is the State of the Saints podcast, Mr. Larry Holder. Thank you so much.